Before we get into this latest story, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Quotes and Notes on James Boswell's Life of Samuel Johnson, Part 2. The link to Part 1, if you haven't checked that out yet, is in the description text. And remember that when I'm quoting from James Boswell, who was Scottish, I'll put on a mild Scottish accent, if that's what that is. And when I'm quoting from the good Dr. Samuel Johnson himself, I will put on a rather posh English accent. Again, if that's what it is. But you'll notice the difference, I hope. And remember, after each passage from the book, I usually give my own observations. So I'll be speaking in my own voice for that. So let's go with Part 2, starting in the year 1772. A cow is a very good animal in the field, but we turn her out of a garden. She's not always a good animal in the field, all the same. I speak from experience. I at last had recourse to the maxim, in vino veritas, a man who is well warmed with wine will speak truth. Why, sir, that may be an argument for drinking, if you suppose men in general to be liars. But, sir, I would not keep company with a fellow who lies as long as he is sober, and whom you must make drunk before you get a word of truth out of him. Well said, Dr. Johnson. What is climate to happiness? Place me in the heart of Asia. Should I not be exiled? What proportion does climate bear to the complex system of human life? I think it plays an important part. It often does for me, anyway. As they say of a generous man, it is a pity he is not rich. We may say of Goldsmith, it is a pity he is not knowing. He would not keep his knowledge to himself. In the years 1773 and 1774. He told me that he had 12 or 14 times attempted to keep a journal of his life, but never could persevere. He advised me to do it. The great thing to be recorded is the state of your own mind, and you should write down everything that you remember, for you cannot judge at first what is good or bad, and write immediately while the impression is fresh, for it will not be the same a week afterwards. Since reading those lines, I've been trying to keep a diary. Not very successfully, though. It is maintaining that you may lie to the public, for you lie when you call that right which you think wrong, or the reverse. Towing the party line, saying what you think is acceptable to others, rather than saying what you really think. I do try to be truthful to myself at all times. He observed that the Irish mix better with the English than the Scottish do. Their language is nearer to English, as a proof of which they succeed very well as players, which Scotchmen do not. Then, sir, they have not that extreme nationality which we find in the Scotch. I will do you, Boswell, the justice to say that you are the most unscottified of your countrymen. You are almost the only instance of a Scotchman that I have known who did not at every other sentence bring in some other Scotchman. Over the years, plenty of Irish have demonstrated that extreme nationality that Johnson seems to loathe. And did not the Irish, some of them anyway, go to battle with Britain for national self-determination? Why, sir, all ignorant savages will laugh when they are told of the advantages of civilized life. Were you to tell men who live without houses how we pile brick upon brick and rafter upon rafter, and that after a house is raised to a certain height, a man tumbles off a scaffold and breaks his neck, he would laugh heartily at our folly in building. But it does not follow that men are better without houses. No, sir, holding up a slice of good loaf, this is better than the bread tree. The Irish are in a most unnatural state, for we see there the minority prevailing over the majority. There is no instance, even in the 10 persecutions, of such severity as that which the Protestants of Ireland have exercised against the Catholics. Did we tell them we have conquered them, it would be above board. To punish them by confiscation and other penalties, as rebels, was monstrous injustice. King William was not their lawful sovereign. He had not been acknowledged by the Parliament of Ireland when they appeared in arms against him. Hear, hear, Dr. Johnson. Addison, who was content with the fame of his writings, and did not aim also at excellency in conversation, for which he found himself unfit, and that he said to a lady who complained of his having talked little in company, "Madam, I have not but 9 pence in ready money, but I can draw for £1,000. I observed that Goldsmith had a great deal of gold in his cabinet, but, not content with that, was always taking out his purse. Johnson replied, "Yes, sir, and that's so often an empty purse." The year 1775, aged 66. My much valued friend, Dr. Barnard, now Bishop of Killaloch, having once expressed to him an apprehension that if he should visit Ireland he might treat the people of that country more unfavourably than he had done the Scotch, he answered, with strong, pointed, double-edged wit, "Sir, you have no reason to be afraid of me. The Irish are not in a conspiracy to cheat the world by false representations of the merits of their countrymen. No, sir, the Irish are a fair people. They never speak well of one another." He's not wrong there. He had long before indulged his most unfavourable sentiments of our fellow subjects in America. For, as early as 1769, I was told by Dr. John Campbell that he had said of them, "Sir, they are a race of convicts, and ought to be thankful for anything we allow them short of hanging." The Yankee tax evaders, eh? He made the common remark on the unhappiness which men who have led a busy life experience when they retire in expectation of enjoying themselves at ease, and that they generally languish for want of their habitual occupation, and wish to return to it. He mentioned as strong an instance of this as can well be imagined. An eminent tallow chandler in London, who had acquired a considerable fortune, gave up the trade in favour of his foreman, and went to live at a country house near town. He soon grew weary, and paid frequent visits to his old shop, where he desired they might let him know their melting days, and he would come and assist them, which he accordingly did. Here, sir, was a man to whom the most disgusting circumstance in the business to which he had been used was a relief from idleness. Idleness and retirement. Most of us always need something to occupy our minds, to be at something that seems worthwhile. When a man writes from his own mind, he writes very rapidly. The greatest part of a writer's time is spent in reading, in order to write. A man will turn over half a library to make one book. Patriotism is the last refuge of a scoundrel. But let it be considered that he did not mean a real and generous love of our country, but that pretended patriotism which so many, in all ages and countries, have made a cloak for self-interest. He again advised me to keep a journal, fully and minutely, but not to mention such trifles as that meat was too much or too little done, or that the weather was fair or rainy. He had, till very near his death, a contempt for the notion that the weather affects the human frame. Again, I disagree. The weather often does affect my mind, even though I know there's nothing I can do to change it. And, of course, it can and does affect one's health. No, sir, admiration and love are like being intoxicated with champagne. Judgment and friendship like being enlivened. The former is ephemeral and often leaves one with a bad head and the blues. The latter is longer lasting and tends to make one stronger. Their learning is like bread in a besieged town. Every man gets a little, but no man gets a full meal. There is, in Scotland, a diffusion of learning, a certain portion of it widely and thinly spread. A merchant there has as much learning as one of their clergy. He never missed an opportunity to have a go at the Scots, did he? I was glad to go abroad, and, perhaps, glad to come home, which is, in other words, I was, I am afraid, weary of being at home and weary of being abroad. Is not this the state of life? I can relate to that. I'm happy to be on the move, then, after a time, I'm happy to get back to a more settled existence. And then I want to get moving again. One is never truly settled. It was a maxim with him that a man should not let himself down by speaking a language which he speaks imperfectly. Indeed, he must have often observed how inferior, how much like a child a man appears who speaks a broken tongue. I agree to a point, but one has to start somewhere when learning a foreign tongue, doesn't one? The year 1776, aged 67. On the benefits of inns or taverns, or pubs as we say today. There is no private house in which people can enjoy themselves so well as at a capital tavern. Let there be ever so great plenty of good things, ever so much grandeur, ever so much elegance, ever so much desire that everybody should be easy. In the nature of things, it cannot be. There must always be some degree of care and anxiety. The master of the house is anxious to entertain his guests. The guests are anxious to be agreeable to him. And no man, but a very impudent dog indeed, can as freely command what is in another man's house as if it were his own. Whereas, at a tavern, there is a general freedom from anxiety. You are sure you are welcome, and the more noise you make, the more trouble you give, the more good things you call for, the welcomer you are. No servants will attend you with the alacrity which waiters do, who are incited by the prospect of an immediate reward, in proportion as they please. No, sir, there is nothing which has yet been contrived by man, by which so much happiness is produced as by a good tavern or inn. Hear, hear, Dr. Johnson, I couldn't agree more, although it's the tienda for me here in Colombia, and, alas, the Irish pub seems to be dying a death. Sir John Hawkins. I have heard him assert that a tavern chair was the throne of human felicity. As soon, said he, as I enter the door of a tavern, I experience an oblivion of care and a freedom from solicitude. When I am seated, I find the master courteous, and the servants obsequious to my call. Anxious to know and ready to supply my wants, wine there exhilarates my spirits, and prompts me to free conversation and an interchange of discourse with those whom I most love. I dogmatize and am contradicted, and in this conflict of opinions and sentiments I find delight. Marriage is the best state for a man in general, and every man is a worse man in proportion as he is unfit for the married state. To be sure not, sir. I believe marriages would in general be as happy, and often more so, if they were all made by the Lord Chancellor, upon a due consideration of characters and circumstances, without the parties having any choice in the matter. So Dr. Johnson wasn't a believer in soulmates, it seems. Dr. Johnson talked with approbation of one who had attained to the state of the philosophical wise man, that is to have no want of anything. I'm approaching that state, aren't I? Or it might be more the case that I'm telling myself I have no want of anything because I'm not in a position to have much. He said, "It is commonly a weak man who marries for love." We then talked of marrying women of fortune, and I mentioned a common remark that a man may be, upon the whole, richer by marrying a woman with a very small portion, because a woman of fortune will be proportionally expensive, whereas a woman who brings none will be very moderate in expenses. Depend upon it, sir, this is not true. A woman of fortune, being used to the handling of money, spends it judiciously. But a woman who gets the command of money for the first time upon her marriage has such a gust in spending it that she throws it away with great profusion. Thus I should be looking for a woman of fortune, but would such a woman take a modest man like me? If I were in the country and were distressed by that malady, I would force myself to take a book, and every time I did it I should find it the easier. Melancholy indeed should be diverted by every means but drinking. Some of us may need to try harder on that read more, drink less front. I do find the drinking less side of it harder to do in Colombia compared to Ireland, all the same. No man but a blockhead ever wrote, except for money. Numerous instances to refute this will occur to all who are versed in the history of literature. Introducing blockhead extraordinaire, Brendan Wrongway Corrigan. But Boswell is right. The instances of those who write for little or no financial recompense are most likely greater than those who have received payment. He appeared to have a pleasure in contradiction, especially when any opinion whatever was delivered with an air of confidence, so that there was hardly any topic, if not one of the great truths of religion and morality, that he might not have been incited to argue, either for or against. I have a tendency to do the same, or at least to try and see the other sides of an argument and put them forward for consideration, even if I don't agree with them. It is better that some should be unhappy than that none should be happy, which would be the case in a general state of equality. Dr. Johnson wasn't a communist or socialist anyway. We may be excused for not caring much about other people's children, for there are many who care very little about their own children. It may be observed that men, who, from being engaged in business or from their course of life in whatever way, seldom see their children, do not care much about them. I myself should not have had much fondness for a child of my own. Mrs. Thrale. Nay, sir, how can you talk so? Johnson. At least I never wished to have a child. Keep your children to yourself, if you can even do that. Before dinner men meet with great inequality of understanding, and those who are conscious of their inferiority have the modesty not to talk. When they have drunk wine, every man feels himself happy and loses that modesty, and grows impudent and vociferous. But he is not improved. He is only not sensible of his defects. I also admit that there are some sluggish men who are improved by drinking, as there are fruits which are not good till they are rotten. Indeed, like medlar fruit, as Johnson went on to say, I know a few who fit this description. They're not good until they're rotten. For general improvement, a man should read whatever his immediate inclination prompts him to, though, to be sure, if a man has a science to learn, he must regularly and resolutely advance. What we read with inclination makes a much stronger impression. If we read without inclination, half the mind is employed in fixing the attention, so there is but one half to be employed on what we read. He told us he read Fielding's Amelia through without stopping. He said, if a man begins to read in the middle of a book and feels an inclination to go on, let him not quit it to go to the beginning. He may perhaps not feel again the inclination. I have found myself at times sticking with certain books that don't interest me that much. But there have been few books that I haven't at least got something out of, hence my tendency to persevere. We were by no means pleased with our inn at Bristol. Let us see now, said I, how we should describe it. Johnson was ready with his raillery. Describe it, sir. Why, it was so bad that Boswell wished to be in Scotland. Like when I longed to be back in Ireland. I jest, kind of. The year 1777, aged 68. Tell Mrs. Boswell that I shall taste her marmalade cautiously at first. Timeo Danos et donne frentes. Beware, says the Italian proverb, of a reconciled enemy. I fear the Greeks even when bearing gifts, from Virgil's Aeneid, said by a Trojan priest warning his people about a large wooden gift from the Greeks. Sir, we disapprove of him, not because he soon forgets his grief, for the sooner it is forgotten the better, but because we suppose that if he forgets his wife or his friend soon, he has had not much affection for them. We do, all the same, have to try to move on, deal with the new normal after grief. Talking of biography, I said, in writing a life, a man's peculiarities should be mentioned because they mark his character. Johnson. Sir, there is no doubt as to peculiarities. The question is whether a man's vices should be mentioned. For instance, whether it should be mentioned that Addison and Parnell drank too freely, for people will probably more easily indulge in drinking from knowing this, so that more ill may be done by the example than good by telling the whole truth. Here was an instance of his varying from himself in talk, for when Lord Halley's and he sat one morning calmly conversing in my house at Edinburgh, I well remember that Dr. Johnson maintained that, if a man is to write a panegyric, he may keep vices out of sight, but if he professes to write a life, he must represent it really as it was. And when I objected to the danger of telling that Parnell drank to excess, he said that it would produce an instructive caution to avoid drinking when it was seen that even the learning and genius of Parnell could be debased by it. And in the Hebrides he maintained, as appears from my journal, that a man's intimate friend should mention his faults if he writes his life. Johnson's contradictions? What did he really think? I suggest the latter. He told us that whatever a man's distemper was, Dr. Nichols would not attend him as a physician, if his mind was not at ease, for he believed that no medicines would have any influence. He once attended a man in trade, upon whom he found none of the medicines he prescribed had any effect. He asked the man's wife privately whether his affairs were not in a bad way. She said no. He continued his attendance some time, still without success. At length the man's wife told him she had discovered that her husband's affairs were in a bad way. When Goldsmith was dying, Dr. Turton said to him, "Your pulse is in greater disorder than it should be, from the degree of fever which you have. Is your mind at ease?" Goldsmith answered it was not. As per Gabor Mate's book, when the body says no, the mind plays a big part in one's health. Goldsmith was a plant that flowered late. There's hope for some of us yet. A fortress which soon surrenders has its walls less shattered than when a long and obstinate resistance is made. Boswell's summation of Johnson's view of those who need to drink a lot to get drunk. I like it. We talked of employment being absolutely necessary to preserve the mind from wearying and growing fretful, especially in those who have a tendency to melancholy, and I mentioned to him a saying which somebody had related of an American savage, who, when a European was expatiating on all the advantages of money, put this question: will it purchase occupation? Johnson: depend upon it, sir, this saying is too refined for a savage. And, sir, money will purchase occupation. It will purchase all the conveniences of life. It will purchase variety of company. It will purchase all sorts of entertainment. I can see both sides to this. One needs to be doing something, but if one has enough money, one's occupation can be one's hobby: writing, reading, playing sports, travelling, etc. The problem is when one has no employment and no savings in order to be at something to keep the mind from fretting. Now, sir, to talk of respect for a player? Smiling disdainfully, I replied, There, sir, you are always heretical. You never will allow merit to a player. Merit, sir? What merit? Do you respect a rope dancer or a ballad singer? No, sir, but we respect a great player as a man who can conceive lofty sentiments and can express them gracefully. What, sir, a fellow who claps a hump on his back and a lump on his leg and cries, I am Richard III? Nay, sir, a ballad singer is a higher man, for he does two things. He repeats and he sings. There is both recitation and music in his performance. The player only recites. My dear sir, you may turn anything into ridicule. I allow that a player of farce is not entitled to respect. He does a little thing, but he who can represent exalted characters and touch the noblest passions has very respectable powers, and mankind have agreed in admiring great talents for the stage. We must consider, too, that a great player does what very few are capable to do. His art is a very rare faculty. Who can repeat Hamlet's soliloquy, to be or not to be, as Garrick does it? Anybody may. Jemmy there, a boy about 8 years old who was in the room, will do it as well in a week. No, sir, and as a proof of the merit of great acting and of the value which mankind set upon it, Garrick has got £100,000. Is getting £100,000 a proof of excellence? That has been done by a scoundrel commissary. This was most fallacious reasoning. I was sure for once that I had the best side of the argument. I boldly maintained the just distinction between a tragedian and a mere theatrical droll, between those who rouse our terror and pity and those who only make us laugh. If, said I, Betterton and Foote were to walk into this room, you would respect Betterton much more than Foote. Johnson: if Betterton were to walk into this room with Foote, Foote would soon drive him out of it. Foote, sir, Quietinus Foote, has powers superior to them all. And look at the way many exalt Hollywood actors today, as I've critiqued oft times before on this blog. I perceived that he pronounced the word heard as if spelt with a double E, heard, instead of sounding it heard, as is most usually done. He said his reason was that if it was pronounced heard, there would be a single exception from the English pronunciation of the syllable ear, and he thought it better not to have that exception. Makes sense in a way, as in ear, hear, heard, keeping the pronunciation constant, that is. His violent prejudice against our West Indian and American settlers appeared whenever there was an opportunity. Towards the conclusion of his Taxation No Tyranny, he says, How is it that we hear the loudest yelps for liberty among the drivers of negroes? Double standards? Well, I never. I think, sir, you once said to me that not to drink wine was a great deduction from life. It is a diminution of pleasure, to be sure, but I do not say a diminution of happiness. There is more happiness in being rational. But if we could have pleasure always, should not we be happy? The greatest part of men would compound for pleasure. Supposing we could have pleasure always, an intellectual man would not compound for it. The greatest part of men would compound because the greatest part of men are gross. Quite, one doesn't find happiness at the bottom of a bottle or glass, or not any meaningful happiness in any case. Johnson, now in his 70th year. No wise man will go to live in the country unless he has something to do which can be better done in the country. For instance, if he is to shut himself up for a year to study a science, it is better to look out to the fields than to an opposite wall. Then, if a man walks out in the country, there is nobody to keep him from walking in again. But if a man walks out in London, he is not sure when he should walk in again. A great city is, to be sure, the school for studying life. And the proper study of mankind is man, as Pope observes. In today's digital age, there is less of a need to be in a city to learn and be connected, to a certain extent anyway. Fortunam reverenter habe, Johnson said in relation to Garrick. Treat fortune with reverence, or handle good fortune with respect. I really believed I should go and see the wall of China had I not children, of whom it was my duty to take care. Sir, by doing so you would do what would be of importance in raising your children to eminence. There would be a lustre reflected upon them from your spirit and curiosity. They would be at all times regarded as the children of a man who had gone to view the wall of China. I am serious, sir. These days this would certainly be viewed as neglect, or at least selfishness. Langton said very well to me afterwards that he could repeat Johnson's conversation before dinner, as Johnson had said that he could repeat a complete chapter of the natural history of Iceland from the Danish of Horribo, the whole of which was exactly thus. Chapter LXXII, concerning snakes. There are no snakes to be met with throughout the whole island. Nicely put, and is that the shortest chapter in history? I am willing to love all mankind, except an American. And his inflammable corruption bursting into horrid fire, he breathed out threatenings and slaughter, calling them rascals, robbers, pirates, and exclaiming he'd burn and destroy them. Miss Seward, looking to him with mild but steady astonishment, said, Sir, this is an instance that we are always most violent against those whom we have injured. He was irritated still more by this delicate and keen reproach, and roared out another tremendous volley, which one might fancy could be heard across the Atlantic. During this tempest I sat in great uneasiness, lamenting his heat of temper, till, by degrees, I diverted his attention to other topics. Some Yanks can have that effect on us. I compared him at this time to a warm West Indian climate, where you have a bright sun, quick vegetation, luxuriant foliage, luscious fruits, but where the same heat sometimes produces thunder, lightning, earthquakes in a terrible degree. I could say that about myself, at times. I do not say, sir, you may not publish your travels, but I give you my opinion, that you would lessen yourself by it. What can you tell of countries so well known as those upon the continent of Europe which you have visited? But I can give an entertaining narrative, with many incidents, anecdotes, jeux d'esprit, and remarks, so as to make very pleasant reading. Why, sir, most modern travellers in Europe who have published their travels have been laughed at. I would not have you added to the number. The world is now not contented to be merely entertained by a traveller's narrative. They want to learn something. Now, some of my friends asked me why I did not give some account of my travels in France. The reason is plain. Intelligent readers had seen more of France than I had. You might have liked my travels in France, and the club might have liked them, but upon the whole there would have been more ridicule than good produced by them. I cannot agree with you, sir. People would like to read what you say of anything. Suppose a face has been painted by 50 painters before. Still, we love to see it done by Sir Joshua. True, sir, but Sir Joshua cannot paint a face when he has not time to look on it. Sir, a sketch of any sort by him is valuable. And, sir, to talk to you in your own style, raising my voice and shaking my head, you should have given us your travels in France. I am sure I am right, and there's an end on't. My dilemma, my problem. Are people interested in hearing my take on my topsy-turvy life in Colombia? Will they learn something from it? I think so, but I've yet to pique the interest of an agent or a publisher. I said to him that it was certainly true, as my friend Dempster had observed in his letter to me upon the subject, that a great part of what was in his journey to the Western Islands of Scotland had been in his mind before he left London. Why, yes, sir, the topics were, and books of travels will be good in proportion to what a man has previously in his mind, his knowing what to observe, his power of contrasting one mode of life with another. As the Spanish proverb says, he who would bring home the wealth of the Indies must carry the wealth of the Indies with him. So it is in travelling. A man must carry knowledge with him if he would bring home knowledge. The proverb, I suppose, sir, means he must carry a large stock with him to trade with. Yes, sir. A bit like a report on a football match or such like. One wouldn't want to hear or read a report from somebody who was ignorant of the teams, never mind ignorant of the sport. And as to regular meals, I have fasted from the Sunday's dinner to the Tuesday's dinner without any inconvenience. I believe it is best to eat just as one is hungry, but a man who is in business, or a man who has a family, must have stated meals. I am a straggler. I may leave this town and go to Grand Cairo without being missed here or observed there. Eat to hunger. I concur, Dr. Johnson, and I also agree this is easier to do for a single man. Nay, sir, we will send you to him. If your company does not drive a man out of his house, nothing will. This was a horrible shock, for which there was no visible cause. I afterwards asked him why he had said so harsh a thing. Because, sir, you made me angry about the Americans. But why did you not take your revenge directly? Johnson, smiling. Because, sir, I had nothing ready. A man cannot strike till he has his weapons. This was a candid and pleasant confession. A nice take on the maxim that revenge is a dish best served cold. Better to reign in hell than serve in heaven. Said by Boswell or Johnson, it's in relation to the first Whig. My fondness for Colombia's working-class barrios could be seen as an example of this. Could be, that is. Wine makes a man better pleased with himself. I do not say that it makes him more pleasing to others. Sometimes it does. But the danger is that while a man grows better pleased with himself, he may be growing less pleasing to others. Wine gives a man nothing. It neither gives him knowledge nor wit. It only animates a man and enables him to bring out what a dread of the company had repressed. It only puts in motion what has been locked up in frost. But this may be good, or it may be bad. But let us consider what a sad thing it would be if we were obliged to drink or do anything else that may happen to be agreeable to the company where we are. Indeed. Sir, there is no more reason for your drinking with him than his being sober with you. Why, that is true, for it would do him less hurt to be sober than it would do me to get drunk. It has been maintained that this superfotition, this teeming of the press in modern times, is prejudicial to good literature, because it obliges us to read so much of what is of inferior value in order to be in the fashion, so that better works are neglected for want of time, because a man will have more gratification of his vanity in conversation from having read modern books than from having read the best works of antiquity. But it must be considered that we have now more knowledge generally diffused. All our ladies read now, which is a great extension. Modern writers are the moons of literature. They shine with reflected light, with light borrowed from the ancients. Greece appears to me to be the fountain of knowledge, Rome of elegance. Can I call myself a moon of literature? Well, I can, but am I? I do not think so. A man has from nature a certain portion of mind. The use he makes of it depends upon his own free will. That a man has always the same firmness of mind, I do not say, because every man feels his mind less firm at one time than another. But I think a man's being in a good or bad humour depends upon his will. I, however, could not help thinking that a man's humour is often uncontrollable by his will. Can we will ourselves into a better mood? I side with Johnson here. I think we can, to a certain extent anyway. Outwardly, we can feign a sunny disposition, even if internally we're feeling down, although in practice this may be difficult to sustain. What I admire in Ramsay is his continuing to be so young. Why, yes, sir, it is to be admired. I value myself upon this, that there is nothing of the old man in my conversation. I am now 68, and I have no more of it than at 28. But, sir, would you not wish to know old age? He who is never an old man does not know the whole of human life, for old age is one of the divisions of it. Nay, sir, what talk is this? I mean, sir, the Sphinx's description of it, morning, noon, and night. I would know night as well as morning and noon. What, sir, would you know what it is to feel the evils of old age? Would you have the gout? Would you have decrepitude? Seeing him hated, I would not argue any further, but I was confident that I was in the right. I would, in due time, be a Nestor, an elder of the people, and there should be some difference between the conversation of 28 and 68. A grave picture should not be gay. There is a serene, solemn, placid old age. I said today to Sir Joshua, when we observed that you tossed me sometimes, I don't care how often or how high he tosses me when only friends are present, for then I fall upon soft ground. But I do not like falling on stones, which is the case when enemies are present. I think this is a pretty good image, sir. Sir, it is one of the happiest I have ever heard. A version of sorts of Michael Corleone's. Fredo, you're my older brother and I love you, but don't ever take sides with anyone against the family again. Ever. I afterwards put the question to Johnson, i.e. the word he would use in place of transpire, as Lord Marchmont had asked Boswell. Why, sir, get abroad. That, sir, is using 2 words. Sir, there is no end of this. You may as well insist to have a word for old age. Well, sir, senectus. Nay, sir, to insist always that there should be one word to express a thing in English, because there is one in another language, is to change the language. Latinizing English, down with that sort of thing. I think the more they are taught, the more modest they are. The French are a gross, ill-bred, untaught people. A lady there will spit on the floor and rub it with her foot. What I gained by being in France was learning to be better satisfied with my own country. Time may be employed to more advantage from 19 to 24 almost in any way than in travelling. When you set travelling against mere negation, against doing nothing, it is better to be sure. But how much more would a young man improve were he to study during those years? Indeed, if a young man is wild and must run after women and bad company, it is better that this should be done abroad, as, on his return, he can break off such connections, and begin at home a new man, with a character to form, and acquaintances to make. How little does travelling supply to the conversation of any man who has travelled? How little to Beauclerk? I'm not so sure, not these days anyway. Travelling may be better than studying at those ages. Or a mixture of both anyway, taking a year out to go travelling during studies, or go travelling for up to a year before commencing studies. Were I to live in the country, I would not devote myself to the acquisition of popularity. I would live in a much better way, much more happily. I would have my time at my own command. But, sir, is it not a sad thing to be at a distance from all our literary friends? Sir, you will by and by have enough of this conversation, which now delights you so much. So he's in favour of country living here. Such vacillation, Dr. Johnson. High people, sir, are the best. Take 100 ladies of quality, you'll find them better wives, better mothers, more willing to sacrifice their own pleasure to their children than 100 other women. Tradeswomen, I mean the wives of tradesmen, in the city, who are worth from 10 to 15,000 pounds, are the worst creatures upon the earth, grossly ignorant and thinking viciousness fashionable. Farmers, I think, are often worthless fellows. Few lords will cheat, and if they do, they'll be ashamed of it. Farmers cheat, and are not ashamed of it. They have all the sensual vices, too, of the nobility, with cheating into the bargain. There is as much fornication and adultery among farmers as amongst noblemen. I'm not so sure about this. Vide Jeffrey Epstein et al. Have you subscribed to this channel yet? If not, why not do so right now? It's free and only takes a second. Thanks!